It began with love, two young people, full of promise, navigating life and chasing dreams. But what followed was a descent into obsession, manipulation, and a series of devastating decisions that exposed deep cracks in the justice system. This is not just a story about the murder of Andrew Bagby, a bright young doctor with a future ahead of him. It's about the heartbreaking ripple effect that one violent act set into motion: custody battles, bureaucratic failures, and the unimaginable loss of an innocent child. As dark truths unfold and desperate cries for justice are ignored, the line between personal tragedy and systemic collapse becomes painfully clear. So how did it all go so wrong, and could it have been prevented? Let's find out. This case is a deeply tragic and complex story that highlights the dark intersections of love and betrayal. It is a harrowing tale of violence and the failure of the justice system. The murder of Andrew Bagby, a promising young doctor, brought a bright future to a sudden, heartbreaking end. What followed were custody battles and the tragic consequences of delayed legal resolutions. Kathleen and David Bagby first met in the 1960s at Disneyland while spending time with mutual friends. At the time, David was serving in the U.S. Marine Corps, intelligent, charming, and sociable. He immediately caught Kathleen's attention. They connected quickly and spent most of the trip talking, becoming inseparable soon after. Within 5 months, they were married. The couple settled in San Diego, California. Kathleen became a nurse, while David, after completing his military service, transitioned to a career as a software engineer. They both dreamed of starting a family, though it was initially a challenge. Eventually, Kathleen became pregnant, a joyful surprise. The birth of their son, Andrew, was a wonderful event. Later, the family moved to the suburbs of San Jose. From a young age, Andrew was friendly and sociable, traits inherited from his parents. He earned several awards that reflected his dedication and hard work. His best friend, Kurt Quenney, had been close to him since elementary school, and the two loved making funny videos together. Andrew cherished family time and always prioritized being with loved ones. In college, he began dating a classmate named Heather, inspired by his mother. He aspired to pursue a career in medicine, which strengthened their bond through shared conversations about the field. Their home life was harmonious and admired by others. After graduating, Andrew applied to several medical schools, but was accepted to only one, a significant disappointment. He decided to reapply the following year and planned to work in the meantime to avoid financially burdening his parents. Just days after receiving rejection letters, Kathleen discovered a misplaced acceptance letter from Memorial University of Newfoundland in Canada. The news changed Andrew's life. In 1995, he moved to St. John's, Canada, to attend the university. The following year, Heather joined him and enrolled in the same institution. However, their relationship began to deteriorate after a few months. Heather abruptly ended their engagement without explanation. Heartbroken, Andrew immersed himself in his studies. This continued until the spring of his third year, in 1999, when he met a woman named Shirley. It was his first serious relationship since the breakup with Heather. Initially, his friends and family were pleased, relieved that Andrew seemed ready to move on, but the happiness didn't last. Shirley was significantly older than Andrew. He was 26 and she was 38. The age difference led to misunderstandings and friction. Shirley had graduated from Memorial University and worked as a teacher for many years before returning to school in the mid-1990s to pursue a medical degree. She graduated in 1998 and began working as a resident at various hospitals. By then, she had developed a troubling reputation. She was frequently accused of mistreating patients and being overly confrontational. One supervisor even noted in a performance review that she appeared manipulative. She had also been caught lying on several occasions, which caused numerous conflicts from the start of their relationship. Shirley displayed controlling behavior. She followed Andrew everywhere and was overly affectionate, to the point that his friends found it disturbing. She would often hug him inappropriately and speak openly about their sex life, shocking both Andrew and his circle. When she learned about Heather Andrews' beautiful ex-fiancé, Shirley became jealous and tearful. Not only that, Shirley would call other women to boast about her relationship with Andrew. This behavior made her come across as insecure and attention-seeking. Andrew's friends and family didn't like her. They often suggested that he could find someone better, especially given his calm demeanor and good looks. However, after his breakup with Heather, Andrew's self-esteem had plummeted. He convinced himself that Shirley was the best he could do and that he shouldn't expect more. His loved ones could only wait and hope that the relationship would eventually end. After graduating from university in 2000, Andrew moved to Syracuse, New York, to start a job at a medical center. Meanwhile, Shirley relocated to Sac City, Iowa, a small town with a population of about 2,000, after signing a 10-year contract to work at the county medical center. Andrew's family was relieved that the two had moved far apart. However, Shirley was determined to keep the relationship alive and frequently reached out to Andrew. Andrew was busy with work and rarely had time to visit her, but Shirley regularly traveled to see him. During their time apart, she often called him on both his home and mobile phones. One day, Shirley visited Andrew and stayed until he had to leave for work. After saying goodbye, she called him claiming she had forgotten her purse at his apartment. Andrew gave her his keys, but when he returned home after his shift, he found that many more items were missing than just her purse. This incident raised serious doubts about Shirley's honesty. Despite feeling betrayed, Andrew still believed he didn't deserve better and continued the relationship. Andrew soon realized he didn't enjoy his job or his new environment in Syracuse. About a year later, he moved to the small, welcoming town of Latrobe, Pennsylvania, with a population of about 8,000. In 2001, he decided to pursue a career in family medicine, and Latrobe seemed like the perfect place to start. The close-knit community appealed to him. Andrew imagined himself as the town's doctor, a trusted figure whom everyone would know, respect, and love. His dream was finally taking shape. But then there was Shirley. She still wanted to be with him. But by this time, Andrew had grown tired of their obsessive and toxic relationship. He had shifted his focus entirely to his career and insisted on breaking up. It seemed Shirley couldn't accept the end of the relationship and continued to hold out hope that she could move in with him. Andrew began ignoring her, which pushed Shirley into stalking behavior. She would leave him up to 30 voicemails a day, despite his determination to end things. In September 2001, Shirley told Andrew she was pregnant and claimed he was the father. Andrew was happy about the idea of becoming a father, but did not want to be tied to such a manipulative woman. Whenever he spoke to another woman, Shirley would somehow find out and reach out to her, claiming to be pregnant with Andrew's child. Unsurprisingly, none of these new relationships lasted. During this time, Shirley eagerly spread the news of her pregnancy and announced that Andrew would be a father. She initially considered having an abortion, but later decided to keep the baby. Her manipulation worked, and within a month, Shirley convinced Andrew to rekindle their relationship. They even began discussing getting engaged. At the end of October 2001, a meeting was held with Andrew's friends and family. during which Shirley was pressured to return to her home in Quince. Andrew hoped this would finally bring an end to her interference in his life. But just 2 days later, on the morning of November 5th, Shirley showed up at his door again. Andrew was preparing to leave for work and didn't want to speak with her, but she insisted they needed to have an important conversation. Reluctantly, he let her into his apartment. He told her they could talk later and suggested meeting at Keystone State Park at 6 p.m. that evening. After working all day at the hospital, Andrew felt uneasy. His co-workers noticed his anxiety and asked what was wrong. He confided that Shirley had unexpectedly appeared at his home again. They urged him to end the relationship once and for all and not waste another moment of his life. Andrew explained that he planned to meet Shirley that evening to finally break things off and that he hoped it would set him free. Andrew planned to meet his best friend, Simpson, at a bar at 9:00 p.m. to celebrate finally escaping his obsessive relationship. Simpson arrived on time, but Andrew never showed up. This was highly unusual. Andrew had never been late or missed a meeting before. Concerned, Simpson assumed Andrew might still be caught up in a conversation with Shirley. He figured they could catch up the next morning at work. However, when Andrew didn't return calls from Simpson, his family, or co-workers, concern deepened. By 9:00 Simpson considered contacting the police to check on Andrew, but was too occupied at the time to follow through. Later that morning, a news report aired a man in a medical uniform had been found dead in Keystone Park. He was identified as Andrew Bagby, 28 years old. A homeless person collecting cans had discovered his body at 6:00, lying in a parking lot next to his car. Dr. Andrew Bagby had been shot 5 times in the back, face, and chest. The fatal shot was fired into the back of his head while he was already lying on the ground. Simpson immediately informed the police, stating that they wouldn't need to search long for a suspect. He already knew who Andrew had last seen and who he had a conflict with. Simpson described Shirley's disturbing behavior and explained that Andrew had planned to meet her that night to officially end their relationship, something Shirley had been unwilling to accept. Detectives found this information significant and quickly reached out to Shirley, who had already returned to her hometown in Canada. Shirley claimed she had been in Iowa all day, sick and visiting her parents. Of course, this was a lie. She had traveled to meet Andrew and stayed at his apartment before their planned meeting in the park. By this point, the police had already interviewed numerous friends, co-workers, and family members, all of whom identified Shirley as the only person Andrew had any conflict with. No one believed her alibi. The most critical evidence came from a witness who identified Shirley's car, a Toyota RAV4 parked at the scene. Nevertheless, the authorities decided not to press charges immediately. They used the next 2 weeks to build a stronger case. Every clue pointed to Shirley's guilt, and her false statements were quickly disproven. Witnesses and security footage confirmed she had been near Andrew's home early that morning and was seen meeting him in the park shortly before the murder. During the investigation, police discovered that a woman later confirmed to be Shirley had recently purchased a .22 caliber handgun and taken a safety training course. During that session, the instructor noticed an issue: the gun tended to jam, leaving a live round next to the spent casing. Coincidentally, Andrew had been shot with that exact type of weapon. Although detectives tried to recover the gun for ballistic testing, they were unable to locate it. Shirley continued to claim she had spent the entire day of November 5th resting in bed in Iowa. However, security camera footage and phone call records showed otherwise. She had left a digital trail, repeatedly calling Andrew and trying to convince him to reconcile. On the morning of the murder, she arrived at his apartment, and Andrew, always kind and respectful, let her in before leaving for work. That same day, a pack of condoms disappeared from his apartment. Later, a matching package, same brand and serial number, was found in Shirley's home in Iowa after she returned from Pennsylvania. This further exposed her lies, as she couldn't keep her story straight. Strangely, Andrew's ex-fiancée Heather was also dragged into the situation. Although Heather had kept her distance, Shirley managed to confront her as well. During this disturbing encounter, Shirley claimed that Andrew had loved her surely more, that their intimate life was better, and that even in death, their love would live on in heaven. Frightened and disturbed, Heather filed for a restraining order against her. Interestingly, after the funeral service, Shirley almost immediately got ready and headed to Canada to assist the authorities. Andrew's relatives planned another funeral service and invited Shirley, hoping to lure her to the U.S., but she declined. As a result, the American police had to work with Canadian authorities, but bureaucratic challenges slowed down the process. Meanwhile, Shirley continued to live freely. On December 12, 2001, Canadian police arrested Shirley. But discussions about her extradition had not yet started due to additional bureaucratic issues. It was expected that she would remain in prison until these matters were resolved. Surprisingly, she was released on bail the next day. As part of her bail conditions, she was required to surrender her passport and report to the police station weekly. Her psychiatrist even contributed to her bail payment. At the age of 40, Shirley had to avoid contact with 8 individuals who had restraining orders against her, including her ex-husband. Investigators found her anxiety concerning as they reviewed her background. Shirley had been married twice and had 2 children from her first marriage. She had an affair with a man who later became her second husband, and they had 1 child together before divorcing. In 1993, Shirley lived with a roommate who was troubled by the way she treated her children. The roommate reported that Shirley often physically abused them, using her hands and nearby objects, unable to bear it any longer. The roommate moved out and notified the authorities. Witnesses also stated that Shirley physically assaulted her children and would leave them home alone for more than a day. However, her second husband contested these accusations, claiming she was a good mother. As a result of the investigation, in January 1999, Shirley gave custody of her children to their biological fathers and continued with her life. In March 1996, Shirley began a relationship with a St. John's resident, Miles Doucette, who was 13 years her junior. After Doucette broke up with her and moved elsewhere in Newfoundland, Shirley began calling him repeatedly. In November 1997, she confronted him in Halifax, Nova Scotia, and struck him in the jaw with her high-heeled shoe. After consulting with his parents, Doucette moved to Westtown Township, Pennsylvania, United States, in 1998. Shirley tracked him to Pennsylvania, leaving threatening voicemails over the next year and visiting his apartment unannounced. He summoned state police on several occasions to order her to leave. On April 7, 1999, Doucette found Shirley lying semi-conscious outside his apartment, having ingested a total of 65 milligrams of over-the-counter medication in an attempt to self-harm. She was wearing a black dress, holding a bouquet of red roses, and had 2 suicide notes on her person, one addressed to Doucette and the other to her psychiatrist. The latter read, "I'm not evil, just sick." Shirley was taken to the hospital, where she underwent gastric lavage. Ultimately, investigators revealed that she hadn't attempted to harm herself. Instead, this was yet another effort to manipulate the circumstances surrounding Andrew's death. Although Shirley's actions were alarming, they were typical for her. Her sense of impunity The sympathy she received and the lack of proper treatment allowed her to systematically torment those close to her. This ultimately led to a violent outcome. Shortly after being released on bail, Shirley held a press conference where she announced that she was 4 months pregnant. Upon learning this, Andrew's parents, Kathleen and David, sold all their belongings, emptied their savings, and moved to Canada to fight for custody of the child. Although paternity could only be confirmed after the birth, they were certain the boy was Andrew's. He was born on July 18, 2002, and Shirley named him Zachary. A DNA test later confirmed that Andrew was indeed his father. When Kathleen and David arrived at the hospital, Shirley refused to let them into the room, and they were not allowed to see their grandson, given Shirley's past behavior toward her other children. Andrew's parents were deeply worried about Zachary's safety and frustrated by the slow pace of the Canadian legal system. They felt powerless and feared for their grandson's well-being while he was in Shirley's care. The extradition process to the U.S. faced continuous delays for various reasons. Ultimately, they were granted only 1 hour per week to visit Zachary, and these visits had to be supervised as if they posed a threat to the child. They were even subjected to searches. Despite these challenges, Zachary became a source of joy for them, who had lost their only child after years of waiting and hoping. In November 2002, things began to change. Shirley was imprisoned, and the extradition process to the U.S. began. She voluntarily transferred full custody of Zachary to Andrew's parents, but under specific conditions. Shirley was allowed to call them every day, and they were required to visit her in prison once a week. The grandparents took this responsibility seriously and never missed a visit, complying with every condition. Despite the distance and harsh weather, they strictly followed Shirley's demands, fearing that any misstep could cause her to revoke their custody rights. In January 2003, Shirley was released once again. She had appealed directly to the judge overseeing her case, asking for advice on how to avoid prison before her extradition so she could care for her son. Surprisingly, the judge agreed to meet with her and provided detailed recommendations. Despite the absurdity of the situation, Shirley was released due to her apparent compliance. Soon after, Kathleen and David lost custody of Zachary. However, they were now allowed to spend significantly more time with him without interference from Shirley or a social worker. Although the Bagby family was unhappy with this arrangement, the judge insisted there was no reason to believe the child's life was in danger. This strange decision came despite Shirley being a murder suspect and having exhibited disturbing behavior in prison, including threatening another inmate with a fork. While Kathleen and David harbored deep resentment toward Shirley for their son's murder, they worked hard to maintain a loving bond with Zachary. It soon became clear that Shirley was exploiting the situation. She abused her freedom by frequently calling Andrew's parents at all hours, demanding financial support. They were forced to follow Shirley's lead, buying food and other necessities for a woman who refused to work and contributed nothing. She often brought up Andrew's death, a subject his parents tried to avoid. Kathleen and David celebrated Zachary's birthday at McDonald's, where the boy ran to hug Grandma Kathleen. This affectionate moment angered Shirley, who yelled that she wouldn't allow Zachary to love them more than her. From that point forward, Shirley began making life increasingly difficult for them. It seemed she wasn't genuinely interested in raising the child. Her intent appeared to be causing pain for Andrew's grieving parents. A final extradition hearing was scheduled for September 2003. While awaiting the proceedings, Shirley began dating a new man. When he learned about her troubling past, he ended the relationship. In response, Shirley began stalking him, making threats, and even claimed to be pregnant. Despite her attempts to create drama and contact him, he ignored her. On August 17th, she called a friend and mentioned that she planned to take Zachary to confront the man. Later that day, she stopped to ask for directions. This was the last time she and Zachary were seen alive. Shirley Turner and her young son, Zachary, vanished without a trace. That same day, a couple on vacation discovered the bodies of a woman and a small boy about 20 minutes from St. John's. Police quickly identified them as Shirley and Zachary. An autopsy revealed that Shirley had overdosed on anxiety medication prescribed to her. The same medication was also detected in a bottle of baby formula. A witness reported hearing a child crying near the beach around 2:30 a.m., but he could not locate the source. Forensic experts determined that, after mixing the medication into Zachary's formula and drinking some herself, Shirley tied Zachary to her chest with a sweater and jumped from a fishing pier at Foxtrap Marina into the ocean. Both died from drowning. Shirley's car was found near the home of the man she intended to confront that evening. Inside, she had left photographs of herself and Zachary, along with a letter accusing the man of convincing her to take her own life and harm her son. However, investigators concluded this was another of Shirley's manipulative tactics, an attempt to create trouble for the young man, who had no idea what she planned. Investigators also confirmed that she was not pregnant, exposing yet another lie meant to control and manipulate those around her. The death of Zachary was devastating for Kathleen and David. They cremated him, just as they had done with Andrew, and scattered his ashes in the same location. David later confessed that he had been so terrified for his grandson's safety and so overwhelmed by the inaction of the Canadian authorities that he fell into despair and even contemplated harming Shirley. David wanted to take matters into his own hands and punish Shirley, who had shattered their family. He kept this plan from Kathleen and later regretted not acting sooner, believing that if he had, Zachary might still be alive and in their care. Ultimately, he decided against it, hoping the final hearing would result in Shirley's extradition to the U.S., where they would have more legal options and a better chance at gaining custody of Zachary, their only remaining source of happiness. When they learned of Zachary's death, Kathleen and David were so heartbroken that they even considered ending their own lives. However, they ultimately chose to channel their grief into a fight for justice, determined to ensure that such a tragedy would never happen again. To reclaim justice, Kathleen and David appeared on television in the U.S. to share their story. They voiced their belief that the Canadian legal and law enforcement systems bore the greatest responsibility for the tragedy. At the same time, they launched a campaign against the psychiatrist who had helped secure Shirley's bail, enabling her release during an active investigation. His actions faced public and professional backlash, and he was eventually fined $10,000. Andrew's parents also criticized the judge who had granted Shirley her release, an action that allowed her to take Zachary's life in October 2006. A report of over 500 pages, authored by a child protection specialist, was later published. It concluded that Zachary's death was entirely preventable and highlighted numerous failings in the legal and child protection systems. The report became a catalyst for reform in Canada's judicial system. In October 2009, the Zachary's Bill was introduced in the House of Commons. It proposed significant amendments to the country's criminal laws, allowing judges to deny bail to individuals accused of serious crimes who posed a risk or had attempted to evade justice, specifically referencing Shirley's case. The story of Andrew and Zachary is not only one of devastating loss, but also of resilience and relentless advocacy. Andrew's parents, David and Kathleen Bagby, turned their unimaginable grief into a determined campaign for change, shedding light on the systemic failures that allowed such a tragedy to occur. Their fight stands as a lasting testament to the love they had for their son and grandson, and as a call to action for society to do better, though the pain of their loss endures. Andrew and Zachary's legacy serves as a powerful reminder of the need for accountability, compassion, and vigilance. Their story continues to inspire reforms and efforts to prevent similar tragedies, transforming their memory into a beacon of hope for justice. The tragic story of Andrew and Zachary Bagby is more than just an account of two heartbreaking deaths. It is a profound indictment of systemic failure and a call to action for justice, accountability, and reform. What began as a young man's pursuit of love and a meaningful life was derailed by manipulation, emotional abuse, and ultimately, violence. Andrew's murder at the hands of Shirley Turner was not only a personal loss for his family and friends, but also a devastating example of how flaws in the legal system can allow dangerous individuals to act without consequence. The tragedy did not end with Andrew's death. The systemic negligence that allowed Shirley to remain free despite clear evidence of her guilt led to an even more unthinkable loss, the death of their son, Zachary. Time and again, Canadian authorities were presented with warning signs, documented patterns of abusive behavior, Shirley's psychological instability, and the threat she posed to her own child. Yet each red flag was ignored or minimized, and the systems in place failed to protect the most vulnerable. In the wake of this unimaginable double tragedy, David and Kathleen Bagby could have been crushed by grief. Instead, they chose the path of purpose. Fueled by the memories of their son and grandson, they launched a determined campaign to expose the shortcomings of the justice system and demand meaningful reform. Their advocacy helped bring about Zachary's Bill, a legislative milestone aimed at preventing individuals accused of serious crimes from being released on bail if they pose a risk to others. Their journey, captured with raw honesty and emotional depth, is not only a memorial to Andrew and Zachary, but a reminder that love can endure even the greatest sorrow. It is a message to the world that silence is never the answer, and that justice delayed can often become justice denied. Ultimately, the Bagby story stands as both a warning and a beacon. It warns us of what can happen when institutions fail to act, but also illuminates how strength, perseverance, and love can spark lasting change. Andrew and Zachary's lives, though tragically cut short, continue to inspire reforms, awareness, and hope for a future where no family must suffer the same fate.